We are witnessing one of the most extraordinary exercises in collective delusion I have encountered in 4 decades of journalism. As Ukrainian forces abandoned Pokrovsk, a city Western media assured us would hold indefinitely, our newspapers continue to publish fairy tales about heroic resistance, while the very ground beneath these narratives crumbles. The question that haunts me tonight is simple. When did telling the truth about war become an act of treachery? I have covered conflicts where propaganda was expected, from the troubles in Northern Ireland to the chaos of post-Soviet collapse, but never have I seen such systematic distortion of reality by supposedly free media. The fall of Pokrovsk represents more than a military defeat. It exposes the complete moral bankruptcy of Western war reporting. What makes this particularly galling is the casual arrogance with which our media dismisses alternative sources. Ukrainian military bloggers, men who have served on these very battlefields, are ignored when they contradict official narratives. Russian sources are dismissed regardless of their accuracy. Independent analysts who question Western assessments face professional ostracism. The pattern is now sickeningly familiar. Ukrainian officials claim victory even as their troops flee. Western journalists dutifully transcribe these claims. Military bloggers, many of them Ukrainian, provide devastating accounts of collapse, which are then ignored by the very newspapers that should be investigating them. This is not accidental oversight. It represents deliberate editorial policy. News organizations have invested heavily in the narrative of Ukrainian resilience. Editors have staked their reputations on predictions of eventual victory. Correspondents have built careers on access to Ukrainian officials who reward favorable coverage. The incentive structure has become entirely corrupted. Journalists who question official narratives find their access revoked. Editors who demand skeptical coverage lose prestigious interviews. News organizations that challenge consensus face accusations of serving enemy propaganda. Meanwhile, the few voices attempting honest assessment are systematically marginalized. Independent military analysts who highlight Ukrainian weaknesses are dismissed as pro-Russian. Former officers who question Western strategy lose consulting contract. Academics who suggest diplomatic solutions face professional ostracism. But let me take you back 18 months when Pokrovsk first appeared in our headlines. Western military analysts assured us this industrial city would serve as an anchor for Ukrainian defenses in Donetsk. Its railway connections, they explained, made it strategically vital. The fortifications were substantial. The defenders were motivated. Russian attacks, we were told, had stalled. These assessments came with impressive credentials. Senior fellows from prestigious think tanks appeared on television to explain why Pokrovsk could not fall. Former NATO commanders wrote op-eds detailing Ukrainian defensive advantages. Defense ministers assured parliaments that additional aid would secure the city. The confidence was breathtaking in its misplaced certainty. Maps were produced showing Russian forces bogged down in approaches to the city. Casualty estimates suggested unsustainable losses for attackers. Weather conditions, we were informed, favored defenders. How confidently they spoke, how wrong they were. The Russians have not stalled. They have methodically encircled Pokrovsk, while Ukrainian commanders issued increasingly desperate calls for reinforcement. Those reinforcements never came, not in sufficient numbers, not with adequate equipment, not in time. Yet, even as encirclement became obvious, even as Ukrainian military bloggers documented the crisis in devastating detail, Western media continued its performance of studied ignorance. Consider the language deployed by our newspapers. Russian advances are always costly and marginal. Ukrainian retreats, tactical withdrawals or consolidation of positions, buildings that fall to Russian control are dismissed as rubble of no strategic value.
The vocabulary of evasion has become standardized across Western media, regrouping substitutes for retreat. Fierce resistance describes hopeless last stands. Strategic redeployment explains abandonments of indefensible positions.
Numbers receive similar treatment. Russian casualty figures are inflated beyond credibility, while Ukrainian losses disappear entirely from coverage. Equipment statistics emphasize Russian material destroyed while ignoring Ukrainian hardware abandoned or captured. Weather conditions always favor whichever side supports the preferred narrative. Mud slows Russian advances but never impedes Ukrainian counterattacks. Rain hampers Russian logistics but mysteriously improves Ukrainian supply lines. This linguistic manipulation serves a crucial function. It allows readers to believe they are receiving factual reporting while actually consuming carefully crafted fiction. The appearance of objectivity masks systematic bias. I am reminded of the final days of South Vietnam. Then, as now, Western correspondents found themselves trapped between official optimism and observable reality. The difference is that in 1975, some journalists retained enough integrity to report what they saw. Today's generation seems content to remain stenographers for failed policies. The human cost of this deception cannot be ignored. Ukrainian soldiers die defending positions their own military bloggers describe as hopeless. Western taxpayers fund operations their own media dare not honestly describe. Politicians make decisions based on intelligence their own journalists systematically distort. But perhaps most disturbing is what this reveals about the state of British journalism itself.
We once prided ourselves on skeptical reporting. British correspondents in 2 world wars established reputations for honest assessment of military realities, even when those realities were unwelcome. That tradition appears to have died somewhere between the Falklands and Afghanistan.
Consider the transformation. Richard Dimbleby reported from Bergen-Belsen despite official discomfort with his descriptions. John Simpson questioned government claims during the Gulf War. Kate Addy challenged military briefings in Bosnia. These journalists understood that their primary obligation was to truth, not to official convenience. Today's military correspondents seem more interested in maintaining access to officials than in discovering inconvenient truths. They embed with military units not to observe honestly, but to share approved narratives. They attend briefings not to ask hard questions, but to receive talking points for their next reports. The financial pressures on news organizations have accelerated this decline. Independent investigation costs money. Contradicting official sources risks losing privileged access. Reporting from dangerous areas requires expensive insurance and security arrangements. It has become cheaper and safer to simply republish official statements than to verify them independently. The result is journalism that serves power rather than holding it accountable. The Pokrovsk debacle exposes this transformation with brutal clarity. Russian forces began their systematic advance on Pokrovsk in August. Ukrainian defenders, according to multiple military bloggers, warned of inadequate reinforcement and dwindling supplies. Artillery ammunition was running short. Air defense systems had been withdrawn to protect more strategic locations. The warnings came from credible sources with direct battlefield access. Deep State, a Ukrainian military analytics channel, documented supply shortages weeks before the collapse. Military Land, another respected Ukrainian source, highlighted critical equipment failures that Western media ignored. These bloggers possessed advantage that traditional correspondents lacked. They spoke the local language fluently. They maintained contacts throughout the military hierarchy. Most importantly, they faced no pressure to maintain official access through favorable coverage. Their reports painted a picture of systematic breakdown that contradicted every official briefing. Units were abandoning positions due to ammunition shortages. Equipment was failing faster than replacement parts could arrive. Morale was collapsing as soldiers realized their situation was hopeless. Yet, Western media continued publishing optimistic assessments. The city would hold, we were assured. Russian losses were unsustainable. Ukrainian morale remained high. None of this was true. Indeed, recent revelations suggest Ukrainian military leadership knew it was false. General Sarsky's recent admissions paint a picture of systematic deception. Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk were ordered to maintain positions long after their commanders recognized them as indefensible. Political considerations trumped military necessity. The result was predictable catastrophe. But here lies the most damning aspect of this affair. Our media knew better. Intelligence sources had warned of Ukrainian difficulties months before the final collapse. Military analysts, not all of them Russian, had documented the deteriorating situation in forensic detail. Ukrainian soldiers themselves had posted desperate accounts on social media. Our newspapers chose to ignore all of this. They preferred comfortable fiction to uncomfortable fact. This represents a betrayal not merely of professional standards, but of democratic accountability itself.
In a functioning democracy, media serves as a check on government policy. When that policy involves spending billions on foreign wars, honest reporting becomes a public service. Citizens deserve to know whether their money achieves stated objectives.
The sums involved are staggering. Britain has committed over 12 billion pounds to Ukrainian aid. The United States has pledged more than 100 billion to assist. European nations collectively have promised hundreds of billions more. These commitments dwarf domestic spending on healthcare, education and infrastructure. Yet parliamentary debates on these expenditures rely heavily on media assessments of their effectiveness. When those assessments systematically distort reality, democratic oversight becomes impossible. MPs vote on aid packages based on fictional accounts of their necessity. Ministers justify spending based on fabricated success stories. The public, meanwhile, receives no honest accounting of where their money goes or what it achieves. Tax increases to fund Ukrainian aid are justified by tales of imminent victory. Cuts to domestic programs are defended by claims of strategic necessity. But when media becomes a propaganda arm of government policy, democracy itself suffers. Citizens cannot make informed decisions based on systematic misinformation. Politicians face no pressure to reconsider failing strategies. The Pokrovsk collapse should have triggered serious questions about Western support for Ukraine. Instead, it has been buried beneath layers of euphemism and misdirection. Consider the current media treatment of Ukrainian military statistics. Casualty figures remain classified or heavily manipulated. Equipment losses are rarely mentioned. Desertion rates, now apparently reaching catastrophic levels, receive no coverage whatever. This is not journalism, it is public relations. The comparison with Soviet-era reporting becomes unavoidable. And then, as now, media served state policy rather than public interest. Then, as now, uncomfortable realities were ignored in favor of ideological convenience. Perhaps even more disturbing is how this mirrors the media failures that preceded other Western disasters. Remember the confident predictions about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, the assured assessments of Afghan government stability, the optimistic forecasts about Libya's post-intervention future. In each case, media organizations that should have provided skeptical scrutiny instead amplified official narratives. Journalists who should have asked hard questions instead accepted comfortable answers. Editors who should have demanded evidence instead published speculation as fact. The institutional incentives that produced those failures remain unchanged. The same think tanks provide the same confident assessments. The same officials offer the same reassuring briefings. The same journalists write the same credulous reports. The irony should not be lost on us. We condemn Soviet journalists for their civility to power. Yet our own media displays precisely the same characteristics when covering conflicts that implicate Western policy. But the consequences of this deception extend far beyond journalism itself. Military strategists base their assessments on public reporting. If that reporting systematically distorts reality, strategies based upon it will inevitably fail. Politicians who rely on distorted intelligence will make catastrophic decisions. Allies who trust Western assessments will find themselves supporting losing causes. The Pokrovsk affair exemplifies this destructive cycle. European governments continue increasing military aid to Ukraine based partly on media reports suggesting such aid might prove decisive, but if those reports systematically understate Ukrainian difficulties and overstate Ukrainian capabilities, European resources are being wasted on a massive scale. British taxpayers deserve to know whether Storm Shadow missiles actually achieve their stated objectives. German citizens should understand whether Leopard tanks provide meaningful assistance or merely expensive targets for Russian drones. French voters might question whether Scout missiles justify their enormous cost. The evidence suggests these weapons systems perform far worse than advertised. Leopard tanks, designed for Central European terrain, struggle in Ukrainian mud and prove vulnerable to ubiquitous drone attacks. Storm Shadow missiles, while sophisticated, face increasingly effective Russian air defenses that limit their operational utility. Most tellingly, Ukrainian crews increasingly request older Soviet-era equipment rather than modern Western alternatives. T-72 tanks may lack advanced electronics, but they can be repaired in field conditions and operated by personnel who understand their systems. Western equipment requires specialized maintenance that Ukraine cannot provide and replacement parts that take months to deliver. These operational realities receive minimal coverage in Western media. Weapons manufacturers spend millions on public relations campaigns that emphasize theoretical capabilities rather than battlefield performance. Defense ministries highlight successful tests conducted under ideal conditions rather than combat results achieved under enemy fire. But honest assessment of these questions requires honest reporting of military realities, precisely what our media refuses to provide. The human dimension of this failure deserves particular attention. Ukrainian soldiers fighting in hopeless positions deserve better than Western journalists who refuse to document their plight. Their families deserve truth about casualty rates rather than sanitized fiction. Ukrainian civilians deserve honest assessment of their military prospects rather than false hope that prolongs their suffering. Even Russian soldiers, yes, Russian soldiers deserve media coverage that acknowledges their humanity rather than reducing them to cartoon villains. War reporting that dehumanizes any participant serves no one except propagandists. But perhaps most tragically, Western publics deserve journalism that serves their interests rather than official convenience. The collapse of Pokrovsk occurred despite months of warning signs that honest reporting might have highlighted. Ukrainian military bloggers documented supply shortages, equipment failures, and morale problems throughout the summer. Russian military advances followed predictable patterns that competent analysis might have identified. Social media provided glimpses of reality that traditional media ignored. Soldiers posted desperate pleas for ammunition. Commanders complained about impossible orders. Civilians described deteriorating conditions in terms that contradicted official optimism. Any journalist with genuine curiosity might have investigated these reports. Any editor with professional integrity might have assigned resources to verify them. Any news organization with public accountability might have prioritized truth over convenience.